human condition to question and to seek the truth, but scrutiny of the mind to make sense of that which cannot be explained.
Delving into the abyss of all things supernatural, our mission to find truth and transmit the knowledge of all things convoluted.
These are the Chronicles of the Arcane.
So, this is our very first podcast. This is Chronicles of the Arcane, and I'm Samantha.
And I'm Jamie.
And we research and study the accounts of all things unexplained, paranormal, and otherwise terrifying in hopes of opening the minds of those closed off from the darker realms, and to educate and remind those whom dwell in the darkness that they are not alone.
Ernest Hemingway once said, quote, "All things truly wicked start from innocence." Tonight's podcast is a direct contradictory of what your mind defines when you think of children. All innocence, if any at all, has been left behind. The children, although deceptive in appearance, is anything but innocent, anything but ordinary. In fact, the children of tonight's topic depict the most unimaginable horrors.
So, in tonight's Halloween special, we will be discussing the phenomenon known as the black-eyed children, possessed children, and child murderers.
So, it's Halloween night, and you settled in for the night to catch the last of the scary movies on your television, when suddenly there's a knock at your door. Your first thought is that it's a bit late for trick-or-treaters to still be out. You get up but feel an uneasiness that you can't explain. As you reach the door, the shadow of two small children can be seen beyond the curtains. Another puzzling thought comes to mind. Why didn't they ring the doorbell? Kids that age love to ring the doorbell. And why were these small children out so late? You open the door to see two children, a boy and a girl, standing at your doorstep. Neither of them are wearing a costume, and instead of the customary trick-or-treat you'd expect to hear, the boy says instead, "We need to come in. May we use your phone to call our mother?" Your unease turns to terror, but you're confused by how frightened you feel. How can two small children have this effect on you? You feel yourself opening the door wider and wider, but it seems like you are being forced to open it by some unseen, almost hypnotic control. Your fear takes over, and you realize something horrifying is going to happen if you let these children inside. You fight yourself to close the door. "Please help us," they plead. And then you tell them you will call their mother if they give you her phone number. Their faces twist with anger, and that's when you realize that their eyes are solid black and void of feeling. And when I say solid black, I mean the sclera and all, completely black. Locking the door, you back away in terror and retrieve your phone from your pocket, never taking your eyes off the silhouettes of the children at your doorstep. They stare at you. You can see the void in their eyes, as if being able to look through and beyond the curtains. You call your neighbor in a panic as the two children vanish from your doorway. Still terrified, but not wanting to lose sight of them, you peer through the window and see them disappearing into the shadows beyond the street lamps, 50 feet away. It was as if they had teleported from one place to another. Encounters with the black-eyed children, also known as the black-eyed kids or BEKs, traces back to the early 50s, but was made a global phenomenon with the birth of social networking and the internet. The term black-eyed kids was adopted into mainstream in the 90s when witnesses encountering these beings turned to the World Wide Web in search of an explanation on what exactly they had encountered, and if others had experienced what they had. Since the 90s, hundreds of eyewitness accounts flood the web, all very strange and all immensely terrifying. They have been referred to as the Antichrist, also alien hybrids, demons, vampires, lost souls, and the cursed. The effects of encountering one of these entities are devastating and often lead to a series of unfortunate events, including illness, irreparable psychological damage, uneasiness, anxiety, paranoia, and in some extreme cases, death. One thing is certain, an encounter with these entities will forever alter your existence.
So some dispute the origins. There are reports of sightings going back to the 1800s, while as others will say that the Black-Eyed Kids have origins pretty similar to that of Slender Man, which famously originated from a creepypasta competition to manipulate photographs to make them as creepy as possible and then give it a legend or backstory. So that's what a lot of people think happened with the Black-Eyed Kids, but as you said, these reportings go back much further. And then I think, as you said while we were talking before, there are also reports in history that could have been Black-Eyed Kids that just didn't have that label at that time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially a lot of the priests in the Vatican back in the
like the Middle Ages.
Yeah, like the Renaissance, especially. Even before the Vatican, there are reports of people who were possessed by demonic entities, and they were said to, their eyes would turn completely black, which is similar to the Black-Eyed Kids, except these were mostly adults that this happened to, but it's very familiar. I think that's why a lot of people recognize the Black-Eyed Kids as being something demonic.
Yeah, I mean, aside from their robotic nature, which we haven't discussed in depth yet, but when these kids come to your doorstep or come up to you in your car, when you're almost always by yourself, they usually never approach people in more than they don't approach people who are in groups.
Exactly.
It's normally a singular person, and sometimes there's, a minor around, no more than 2 people.
Or if there is another person, that other person is sleeping upstairs or in the bathroom. They do definitely tend to isolate people. It's weird because it's like they know that those people are alone at that time when they come to, when they approach your door or your car, or whatever the situation may be.
That's really creepy.
It's very creepy.
So, these kids approach you while you're alone, and then they're also very robotic in nature. They have very almost rehearsed sounding demands that they just repeat over and over again. And aside from that, they're also usually wearing ill-fitting, almost Amish-style clothing. Very out-of-date clothing.
Yes. Very drab as well. They don't use bright colors. It's always like real earthly monotone colors. And also, witnesses have also said in many of the reports that they hover a few inches above the ground. Everything about them seems to be out of this world. Like you get this uneasy feeling just from seeing them, and it's not like, if you just seen a child, you would think, it's a kid. You wouldn't be afraid of them, even if they, wore these type of outfits and clothes. There's definitely a nervous anxiety that you get just from first sight of these creatures, and it's not even. That's before you even know that they're floating or that their eyes are completely black. You just feel an uneasiness instantly. It's like you feel like they're not supposed to be.
Okay, so like we said, you're very uneasy about this.
Yeah.
And these sightings are becoming more and more frequent. Just in this past month, September, the British paper The Daily Star ran 3 headlines almost consecutively about the Black-Eyed Children, one calling the recent sighting and interactions a plague. So,
because it's happening so often.
Right, it's happening so often that they're calling it a plague. Snopes has not disproved the Black-Eyed Kids. Instead of listing them as true or fiction, they list them as a legend. And they actually quote a source who says, quote, "These sightings, especially in the Portland area, are very, very real," end quote.
Wow.
Right? That's creepy.
I got goosebumps.
It's definitely one of those things that affects a lot of people. It's not a localized thing. A lot of legends are very localized. You only hear about them in certain parts of the country, or smaller countries. If it's in Europe, it's normally the smaller countries. But this is definitely a legend that permeates all cultures. At least all Western cultures, correct?
Yeah, it's actually there are also there have been sites in third world countries, people that don't have a lot of the internet and stuff, and definitely don't have money to just go out and purchase, $300 contact lenses for practical joke reasons. There are experiences of these almost tribal people relating stories to tourists and such that this is a common thing that they've seen over there as well. So it's not just going on here in the States, it's going on all over the place, but I think we hear about it more here because of our social networking.
That is definitely one of the creepiest things I've heard about the black-eyed kids, that
it definitely makes them more substantial.
Absolutely.
And another thing too, the witnesses generally, in most of the cases, are people of authority, like police officers or people in the military. A lot of those people are the people who are having these sightings and experiencing these black-eyed kids, which, I'm not saying that all men of authority
are above lying.
Yes. It just makes it more compelling to know that it's people who, serve and who are, who hold honesty and truth and moral values and higher standards.
Right. These also, to bring your point more forward, these are people who are trained to recognize, a hoax.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say.
Yeah, they're absolutely trained to recognize a hoax, so they're not gonna fall for some teenager who, like you said, just went out and bought contacts. Mm-hmm. They're not gonna fall for that, especially when they see this kid levitating. That's not a kid in contacts.
That's pretty scary. It's pretty scary.
Another thing I want to bring up, just real quick, black-eyed kids, at least when I was doing my research, reminded me quite a bit of the Men in Black, because the Men in Black, especially the sightings where people relate them to possibly being aliens, those particular sightings report the Men in Black as being very robotic, not really knowing much about the culture, repeating phrases, and getting angry when they don't get the answers that they want. These are all things that are associated with the Men in Black, so something to think about. But not everybody thinks of the black-eyed kids as aliens. Some people think of them as demonic. Some people also think of them as vampires. But while we're on the topic of demonic possession in children, that is our next topic. And it's very rare. Possession in children is not something you come upon very frequently. There's the, overwhelmingly famous case of Roland Doe, who The Exorcist was written about. But then there's also one, if you Google right now, that comes up at the top of every search, and that's the case of LaToya Ammons. Sorry.
This is the case of exorcism in Gary, Indiana, which is just a few hours from our location, which is pretty unnerving.
Yes, close to home.
Extremely close to home. It was in November of 2011, I believe, when Ammons, her mother, and her 3 children realized that something paranormal was happening to them. It all began when the family noticed large black flies swarming within their screened-in porch during the dead of winter, which in itself is very odd. LaToya's mother, Rosa, recalls, quote, "We killed them and killed them, but they kept coming back. Little did they know that it was just the beginning of their strange and horrifying experiences. Footsteps, doors opening and closing, shadowy figures, and even wet footprints appearing before them on the floor turned their family home into a place of unease. But from there, the story gets really, really bizarre, and the circumstances are corroborated by multiple witnesses including hospital officials, law enforcement, officials from the Department of Child Services, and even a priest.
Creepy. Very creepy.
That's a lot of, like, substantial witnesses.
Right, a lot of men in authority.
Exactly. Well, speaking of, on March 10th, 2012, the family's unease turned into terror as multiple family members witnessed LaToya's 12-year-old daughter levitating, unconscious above the bed. She eventually descended back onto the bed and regained consciousness, but had no memory of the levitation. The family sought the help of church officials and a clairvoyant who helped bless their home of demonic spirits. But things got worse. LaToya's 3 children, 7, 9, and 12 years old, began showing signs of demonic possession. Their eyes bulged, evil smiles spread across their faces, and they spoke in unnatural low tones. So this isn't just one kid. This is an entire family being tormented.
Absolutely.
Even LaToya felt out of control and convulsed and shook uncontrollably at times. The youngest boy sat in dark closets speaking to another boy about what it felt like to be killed, except no one else could see the other boy. They also witnessed the 7-year-old flying out of the bathroom as if he had been thrown. Some nights were so bad that the family slept at a hotel. The Department of Child Services were called to investigate the home and establish whether or not their environment was a safe place for them. The case manager reported that psychological evaluations concluded that the family was not delusional and were of sound mind. However, the 7-year-old would growl at the investigator. His eyes would roll back in his head when she tried speaking with him. He attacked his older brother, choking him and refusing to let go. They pried his hands from his brother's throat as he growled in an unnatural voice, "It's time to die. I will kill you." Then the older brother began savagely ramming his head into his grandmother's stomach. All she could do was hold his hands and pray. And the events that followed this would not only rattle the witnesses involved, but also provide evidence of the paranormal and shake the foundation of reality as we know it. In her report, the DCS investigator wrote, quote, "The 9-year-old boy had a weird, unnatural grin on his face and started walking backwards up the wall to the ceiling and flipped over the top of his grandmother, landing on his feet. He never let go of her hand," unquote. The nurse that was in the room corroborates the horrific event, adding, quote, "He didn't just walk up the wall. He glided backwards on the floor, wall, and ceiling. There's no way he could have done that," unquote. Upon seeing this, both the nurse and the DCS investigator ran out of the room in terror. The family underwent a series of exorcisms, and with the help of the bishop and a reverend, the family now lives a peaceful and normal life.
So, this whole ordeal started in November 2011, which that's when they moved into this house in Gary. That's when they began, experiencing the flies and other strange occurrences. I believe they also heard loud footsteps in their hallways, the typical haunting type thing. But it wasn't until April of 2012 when Child Protective Services got involved. So that's a solid chunk of time that this family was experiencing just horrific events. And that's actually why CPS was called in. The kids weren't attending school frequently enough, and they were reported as truant. And that's when CPS got involved and made sure they were trying to make sure that the kids were living a healthy lifestyle, and that they weren't being neglected. That's when she said, "Oh no, this is due to demonic activity," and things got a little bit crazy.
That's when they started questioning her sanity.
Exactly. Because the mother in this situation, or the grandmother, I should say, Rosa or Rose?
I think it's Rosa.
Rosa, okay. Rosa Campbell was deeply religious. She still is. She's deeply religious, and so there's a lot of speculation that she caused mass hysteria But as we get into this discussion a little bit more, you'll realize that that's kind of unlikely. They got involved, and that's when the CPS worker witnessed the 7-year-old son levitating and walking backwards, that whole thing, which is terrifying in and of itself. But things got a little bit creepier. When they contacted Reverend Mike Magano, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, I'm not entirely sure. When they contacted him, he contacted the bishop of the area, and he wouldn't sanction a full exorcism. So Mike Magano had to contact 2 other priests who had to tell him the rites. So the first 2 times he did the exorcism, he did it in English, which if you do a little bit of research into it, you'll find that that's not, that's kind of the watered down version. So then when he did it in Latin, that's when it finally took hold. To me, that's Creep Town right there.
Mm-hmm. That makes it more real.
Yes.
It definitely does.
Because it's not like these kids know Latin.
Mm-hmm.
So how would they know to stop doing their, their demonic impression? I don't even know how you would say that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that so many people witnessed these really scary events, these children levitating, there was people in law enforcement that saw this, and like I said before, the DCS investigator and a nurse who was evaluating the children saw this boy. Like, when I think of it, I think of the first Nightmare on Elm Street, where the lady is just thrown up to the wall and floating around. It terrifies me, because that was the scariest thing I've ever seen. But that's what I think of when I think of this boy. And this is witnessed by a nurse as well as a DCS investigator. That's a lot of real witnesses, not just random people like family that could, like you said, with the mass hysteria, that could be feeding into this this negativity. These are real people that saw this happen, and they shared an experience together that was identical.
Even 2 police officers that weren't involved in actually seeing, the body manipulations with the levitation and the walking up the wall. There are 2 police officers who came back to take pictures of the house after the family had pretty much vacated. This is when they were staying in one of the hotels, I believe. The police officers took a picture of the outside of the house. You can find this picture on the internet if you Google it. We will link it to our website if you want to check that out. And we'll put it on our Facebook as well. But this picture, you can see a humanoid figure very clearly.
It's very clear.
In the front window. I believe it's on the right side of the picture. Mm-hmm. But it looks like a very like a childish depiction of a ghost almost.
Yeah, it's quite eerie.
It is. But it's clear. You can see it there, and this is physical evidence that everyone can see. Mm-hmm. The picture hasn't been manipulated. A lot of people will say that it's matrixing or it's pareidolia.
It's just so... It's so substantial that it's taken by police officers. Mm-hmm. Not just one police officer, but 2 police officers.
They really have nothing to gain from lying about this. So
it's a substantial piece of evidence. It's pretty chilling when you look at the picture.
And if you're from the same area as us, you might remember when this happened. And this actually did happen a couple of years ago. Like I said, it started in 2011. News broke in 2012. That's when Ammons regained custody of her children. But it's a little bit curious. Major media didn't pick it up until January of this year, 2014. So
That is odd.
it is odd. It's almost as if someone was trying to bury that news, in my opinion.
It was all over the news, though. I remember when it was... they didn't air it for long, but it hit worldwide news, didn't it?
In January it did.
Oh, okay.
In January of this year it hit worldwide news. But if you go back further from that,
There's nothing.
There's nothing. Although I do remember when it hit local news outlets, because I worked at a local television station, but it definitely didn't get the mass media press coverage at that time, which I find creepy. I don't exactly know why it would have come out January of this year unprovoked like that. Another possession of a minor that you might want to check out would be that of Annalise Michaels. Was that her last name?
Yeah. Michaels or
Michaels,
Michael.
yeah.
Foreign name. German, I think.
Yeah, she's German. And we'll link that.
That's pretty sad and tragic. She actually died.
She did. If you've ever seen The Exorcism of Emily Rose, it's loosely based on the story of Annalise Michaels or Michaels. But the truly creepy part of her particular story is the audio file of her exorcism. It is terrifying.
We'll link that on our Facebook.
We will link it, but I can't guarantee you that I will ever listen to it again.
It's pretty disturbing.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it. So
it's very unnerving. It's like something you've never heard before come out of a human being. It's pretty terrible.
She became very violent. In cases of possession or suspected possession, the individual often becomes violent and lashes out. In the past, several criminal behaviors were thought to be caused by possession, one of which being murder. Our next topic deals with the particularly unnerving reality of children who murder.
Wow.
That's terrible. I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, I can't. You know, I've been reading so much about the child killers, just researching for the podcast, and I still can't. I can't imagine. I can't imagine a kid doing that.
It's one of those things you don't want to get too deeply into, but we're about to. We're delving into it.
Yeah, our next topic goes deep into the lives and the horrors of child murderers. What drives them to kill? Experts say that the first 5 years of life are the most important and detrimental to development. Children who kill are often products of abusive and neglected environments. Most of these children are abused both mentally and physically, and in turn are created monsters through this abusive conditioning. This is the reality that they come to know. Quote, "I'm not angry. It isn't a feeling. It is a void that comes. It's an abyss. It's beyond rage, beyond pain. It's a draining of feeling." Unquote. Mary Flora Bell was 11 years old when she strangled and murdered 4-year-old Martin Brown on May 25, 1968. Then again on July 31st of the same year, she and a friend, Norma Bell, strangled and murdered 3-year-old Brian Howe, leaving his lifeless body on a mound of fallen rubble, but not before carving an N into his stomach with a razor blade, which in itself is pretty sick.
Yeah.
Not only that, they also cut his hair with scissors, mutilated his penis, which I think has some kind of symbolism to her upbringing.
Correct, yeah.
And also, she slashed his legs with the scissors. She was arrested the following day and charged with 2 counts of manslaughter when she quoted, "That's all right by me." Upon being brought in, she told one of the guards, quote, "Murder isn't that bad. We all die sometime anyway." Unquote. It's very disturbing.
A child shouldn't be saying that.
No. On December 17th, 1968, she was convicted of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility and was shown to have the classic symptoms of psychopathy. The judge described her as intelligent and manipulative and said, quote, "She posed a very grave risk to other children." Which brings us to the question, what could possibly possess an 11-year-old to commit such heinous acts? Mary was the product of her environment and conditioned to be callous and lacked an emotional bond with humans. Her mother was a prostitute who often left Mary alone for months at a time while she was away on work, and when she brought work home with her, she allowed her clients to sexually abuse Mary when she was just 4 years old, which is unimaginable.
Right.
Her mother also verbally and physically abused her as well. Mary never knew who her father was, but credits a criminal and a felon her mother was married to as her dad. She kind of looked up to him, and I think that was a lot of the inspiration for the things that she had done. Family members later confessed that Mary's mother attempted to kill Mary in the first weeks of her life with the intent of making it look like an accident, which makes
Poor
me sick.
girl. Yeah.
After a 12-year sentence, Mary was released in 1980 and was granted anonymity.
And the anonymity was not only for her, it was also for her daughter. So, this ruthless killer has a daughter.
And a granddaughter now,
And a
right?
granddaughter now, yeah. That's actually come out. Her anonymity has been... it's actually been granted 3 times now because she's been found out a couple of times. So, but getting back to the murder she committed with Norma Bell, no relation, by the way. They were not related. I kind of think that it shows the manipulation going into this, that she probably carved the N into this child's torso, because that obviously kind of leads the cops back to Norma, who she blamed this murder on.
The interesting part of what you just said is that they recognized it as an M originally, but that's because it looked like somebody went back and carved the extra little leg on the N to make it look like an M. So in my mind, that's Norma going back to, maybe she's seen for an instant what Mary was doing, and what she was capable of, and trying to put the blame on her, and thereby, putting the blame back on Mary by changing the N to an M.
Right. And that's never, been proven in court or anything, that's why the desecration of the body, I guess, happened. That's just our take on it. Speaking of child murders, there are actually several types of child murderers. The ones that we hear most about are going to be the thrill killers, the minors who kill just purely for the joy of it, to see if they can get away with it. That's what's known as a thrill kill. There's also spree killers. That's what school shootings are normally designated as, because it happens in a short amount of time with a high body count. And then there's also serial killers, and that's going to be the murderers like Mary Bell, who kill once, get a taste of it, and then they want to kill more. Particularly with Mary Bell, one thing to note is prior to the 2 murders, the first one, they didn't actually track back to Mary until after she had been convicted of the first one, or the second one. But prior to those, there was another small toddler who was hurt very badly. He was pushed off of a tower, I believe. And they think that she might have done that. At the time, it looked like a accident, because the child couldn't verbalize what had happened. So it happened in a very close proximity, but it's never been proven that that was her. 3 cases that I just kind of wanted to touch on, because I find them very unnerving, I guess. Yeah. The first one being Mary Bell, which we've already gone over. The second one would be Jesse Pomeroy, who was, at the age of 11, he was accused of kidnapping and torturing several other children, 7. And by kidnapping, I mean he put them in a pretty much a holding cell. It was kind of like a crate, and he tortured them by burning them, cutting them through the grates. And when he was released from juvenile hall, which he was supposed to be in until he was 21, he was released a year and a half later, I believe, for good behavior, which again goes to show the level of manipulation that these children are capable of. Yeah. When he was let out, he murdered a 10-year-old girl, which he fully, he confessed to murdering the child, and he was also accused of murdering another 4-year-old boy. He, at the time, this was in the mid-1800s, he was known as the Boston Boy Fiend. So to get that kind of name in the papers, you have to do some crazy shit.
Yeah.
And then the last case I want to touch on is that of John Venables. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Robert Thompson, who were both 10 years old when this happened. They kidnapped and murdered a small boy, age 4, James Bulger. This case is one of the most disgusting cases. It's all terrible, children murdering other children, but this one, gosh, it really is hard to talk about. They kidnapped this child outside of a butcher shop while his mother was waiting in line, and they made the boy follow them for 2 miles, all the while torturing him on this walk. Up to, I believe, upwards of 30 people saw this happening, and they thought that it was just harmless play between siblings. But when they finally got to their destination, which was a train track, they beat him and left him on the tracks to die. There are reports that there was at least one prior attempt by the boys to do this to another child as well, so that's a side note. But once he was on the tracks, they I believe sexually molested him, and then they also mutilated his body. They thought he was dead. They actually covered his face with bricks when they thought he was dead, but he hadn't died at that point. He died shortly before the train severed his body in half.
Oh, yeah, that's awful.
That one is difficult.
The first take we did of the podcast, we actually went into a lot more detail, and it was so disturbing that we kind of couldn't even speak after that. So yeah, we're leaving a lot of details out this time.
This is a very edited version, and it's still awful.
It's very awful. I can't imagine.
Yeah, these
children, I can't believe how monstrous they are. I mean...
Right. I mean, and there are several other cases of child murders, but we wanted to zero in on a few that showed just zero remorse. They couldn't care less that they had, taken these lives.
One of the scariest thoughts is that, the boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, they've been released recently, and along with Mary Bell, all these people are still out there, living a life, free, like among us, which, everyone deserves, to live, and maybe the fact that they were children, and perhaps they learned a lesson while they spent their time in it wasn't even a prison, it was just like a school for bad children, boys and girls. Boys and girls facility. But the thing is, how can they really learn? Being that cold and callous, these people are still out there. That's just terrifying to think about.
If they're not a true psychopath, yes, they can be rehabilitated. These children show all of the classic signs of true psychopathy. You know, they're emotional, just completely emotionally void. They show zero emotion, unless it benefits them. They can feign emotion, but they do not actually feel the emotion, which in itself is pretty scary. Goodness. There's actually an article in the New Yorker by Jennifer Kahn, and it's called "Can You Call a 9-Year-Old a Psychopath?" You guys should check that out because it's a case study of this child from, I believe, the age of 5 to about 9. And it talks about how this child is just truly monstrous and shows no emotion, is completely callous and cold, even to his siblings. He's, he really terrorizes these other children. Physical violence, taunting, you name it. So the parents put this child in a program to try to rehabilitate him, because they didn't think that he was a true psychopath. It's hard to diagnose a child as a psychopath because children go through stages where they're just completely self-centered. I'm sure you can relate to that.
Yeah. Aw, yes, I can.
But that is part of normal development. We've all been through it. You know, I was a terrible child, but we grow out of it. Whereas a true psychopath, they don't grow out of it. It's not just a phase. This is just how these people are. And when you get to the end of the article, it pretty much says this child, even though he's been through years of therapy, shows little to no improvement.
So basically, there is no conditioning. These people are born this way.
Yeah. Some of them, I guess. I don't know if you can create a psychopath, but I do believe that some people just are born with that chemical imbalance.
So what do you think about Norma Bell having the bad abusive childhood that she had?
Mary Bell?
Who did I say?
You said Norma, which
Yes.
is the other one. But Mary
Bell.
Mary Bell, yeah. I mean, that too, I feel like I think that you can create the right conditions, because Mary Bell's childhood is actually just remarkably similar to Charles Manson's childhood, who is also a known psychopath. So it's possible that in the right conditions you can create this, but just through the research that has been done, I also believe that there's just a chemical imbalance, possibly even in the womb, that creates this particular personality type. But you guys should definitely check out that New Yorker article. So that brings me actually to my next point. Something else you guys should check out would be our YouTube channel. On YouTube, we are Chronicles of the Arcane. We'll be posting some bonus videos, like our top 10 favorite horror movies individually, mind you. So you could get 20 recommendations. I think we might have a little bit of crossover, but maybe not.
I think there's only one crossover.
Really? I bet I know what it is. And you will too when you watch our videos. We'll be linking that to our Facebook page as well. Mm-hmm. So you guys should check that out. We're Chronicles of the Arcane on Facebook. We post some pretty great articles on our Facebook. You might even be able to guess what our next episodes are from the articles we post. Yeah?
Some of them are pretty off the wall and not related whatsoever to what we're doing. But
this is true.
But most of them are from our research.
I have a lot of Google alerts set up for just paranormal. I think I have a Google alert for paranormal, one for ghosts, one for UFOs. So anything that pops up I might link to. But it's around Halloween, so I'm getting some pretty crazy hits lately. We also would love for you to leave feedback for us on our Facebook. If you've got something that you want us to do a podcast about, if you've got some bone to pick with, maybe I pronounce a word weird or something and you want to tell me, go for it. I want to hear about it. I want to know what you guys have to say about us and about our podcast, what you want to hear about. We've got some awesome interviews lined up coming up. So if you've got something you want to talk to us about, please contact us.
Yes, definitely.
We have an email that you can get to us through. That's Chronicles of the Arcane at outlook.com. I don't check it as often as I should.
I'll check it. I'll check it every day.
Jamie will check it every day. So if you get a really, really sweet reply, it's probably from Jamie. Just saying. We've got a couple of really cool episodes in the works right now. We're going to talk to local tarot reader Megan Hagen. She's out of Owensboro if you guys are interested. You can get in touch with her through Facebook. We also have a few interviews about local ghost activity and UFO sightings. A lot more than you would expect, actually.
Yeah, I was really surprised by how many people wrote in to tell us their experiences on UFOs.
Absolutely. If you have an experience that you would like to share with us, please get that into us. Our next episode will be a study on EVPs and the science behind them and also behind paranormal research. So we hope that you will check that out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
That pretty much concludes our first episode. So this has been pretty exciting, huh?
It has been.
We definitely want to thank you guys for listening. We want to thank you guys for all of the amazing support we've gotten. We actually already reached our 100th fan. So we're up to 101 right now. That could change by the time this airs because we're doing this quite a bit in the future. Speaking of, this is going to launch on Halloween. So what are you going to be wearing on Halloween?
For Halloween, I'm just going to be mom this year. I know.
It's boring.
I know. I'd like to really sit down and put more thought into it, maybe be more gory and gruesome, but I've been spending a lot of time researching for this podcast, so I'm just going to be mom, which is sometimes better because you can sit back and just watch the kids have fun. How about you? What are you going to be?
Well, we're handing out candy at work, so I had to dress up, and I can't be my normal gruesome self. So I've got a t-shirt I'm going to wear that's a Joker t-shirt, and I'm going to paint my face. Is someone here?
There shouldn't be. It's awfully late. It's like almost midnight. I'm going to go check on that.
Okay.
That seems pretty determined.
It's pretty sketchy. I feel like you should say no to that.
What do I do? No, there's no way.